So, my sister asks, if God speaks to you and it goes wrong, so I'm guessing she's just more saying she should pray for something and it's not gone the right way.
Yeah.
Is it considered God's plan? And then the second bit is, if God's all knowing, do you know it was going to go wrong, but let it happen anyway? So it's kind of like a two-parter. It's quite a hard one to answer, to be honest. Well, I think so anyway.
Yeah, it is a hard one. Just say that first part again. Let me make sure I get it straight in my head.
Right. So the general premise is, if God speaks to you, so we're assuming she's prayed for something.
Yeah.
And it's not worked out in the best. So now she's thinking, oh, pray for something. It's not worked out. So God's let it gone wrong. Oh my gosh, I cannot speak English today. So God's let it go. Has he let it gone wrong on purpose?
Yeah.
Sort of thing, like just to like learn a lesson or something, or is he just gonna let it go wrong, fully knowing it's gonna go wrong, sort of thing. If you know what I mean?
So that's the second part, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult one. I was thinking about this. I was thinking about this earlier, and my belief is that God knows everything that's going to happen. He's outside of time, we often say. So I obviously we're talking from a Christian perspective here, because that's what we both are. For me, God knows everything that's going to happen, and we talk about him being outside of time. So to him, the whole of eternity is like, well, it's not like a painting, but if you could imagine looking at a painting, then he can see it almost like that. I don't think it's not as fixed as that, probably, but it's just a visual image of it. That being said, I think I was trying to think of some good examples. I thought of a few biblical examples of times when, so God in the Old Testament sort of talked to Abraham and said, "You're going to have a son," and Abraham, in his wisdom, heard this and then went and got his servant. Well, him and his wife agreed to get her servant pregnant, basically, which was done back in those days. And so he fathered a child through his wife's servant, and that wasn't what God was intending. Well, it wasn't what God's promise to them was. However, God let it happen, and God has used that son to he raised up empires and nations through that son and blessed the son. But then God also fulfilled the promise that he initially intended, and gave Abraham and his wife a child directly. Now, do I think God knew that Abraham was going to do that? Yes, I think he did. And I think the way God's made the universe is that there are consequences when we don't do things the right way or the way that God was intending. Even when we've prayed about it, we still make mistakes. That's part of humanity. And it's part of being able to make our own decisions and being able to have there being real consequences to our lives. So yeah, I do think that God knows, and God allows us to make decisions and there to be real consequences, because actually when we experience real consequences, if there were no real consequences, I don't think we'd ever really truly know. We wouldn't really you grow a lot through failure and bad circumstance sometimes. I'm not there's another conversation to be had about people who face lots and lots of really difficult and really challenging situations all the time, and their lives just seem to be totally unfair, but that's a different probably conversation. But I don't want to get too far off topic talking about that. But
the way I sort of tried to explain it, I was like, yeah, take this with the biggest grain of salt. I was like, sometimes God can use these lessons to help you grow your faith, through whatever particular thing you're going through. So it might not be well, obviously it's not the right thing right now, but the next thing that's coming will be even bigger and better than the thing you probably already asked for. But obviously that takes a lot of faith and a lot of courage to keep pursuing and keep praying. It's quite difficult. It's not just a prayer and go, like people often use it like the example like a vending machine. You can't just pray and then whoop, out comes your perfect prayer. It just happens exactly the way you want to. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and then you learn and you grow faith, or you just have a difficult time. But either way, that's the whole point of faith, is that you got to keep pursuing regardless of the outcome.
Yeah, I think on a really basic level, if you're a parent or you've seen parents raising kids, you don't. Sometimes you'll tell your kids how they should do things, or to avoid certain things. I don't know. An example might be if you're teaching your kid to ride a bike, you're going to tell them how to do certain things, and you're going to know that if they do certain things, they're going to fall off.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you allow them to go through that experience in a reasonably controlled environment for most people. But you allow them to learn from the mistakes and the failures. And obviously real life's a lot more, the stakes are a lot higher. And there are other factors, other people making mistakes, other consequences from people's actions. However, and they've got to factor all that in. So it's a really complex situation. We're not talking about an isolated incident like a parent with a child in certain situations. But the facts are the same. A child will learn a lot more about how not to do things and how they should do things by experiencing the wrong. You would never intentionally allow a child to put their hand in a fire, but if they do it, they really know what the pain of fire feels like, and they'll really avoid doing it again, because there's something different about being told that the pain is there and experiencing the pain for yourself. I think sometimes the people who have the deepest love for humanity, for others, and for those around them, are those who have gone through the greatest loss, because they know what loss feels like. They know that they can get a real sense of real deep empathy for others, and a love that you just don't see without experiencing loss and having loved so deeply. So yeah, I think God knows, and I think for whatever reason he lets us go through it at times, and a lot of the time it's for our good. Sometimes it's a natural consequence of the world, and I think if you're a believer, then ultimately God will work that for your good. But I do think there are consequences to actions as well, and if there weren't, then it wouldn't be real. It'd be a fake simulation almost. You could do whatever you could choose any action, and there would be no consequence to it, and that wouldn't be real, would it?
No, it would not. Yeah, that's very difficult, because obviously you got to practice your own free will, and then you go into the side tangent. Do you really have free will if he's already known? And you can go into a whole debacle. So when I was trying to have my own opinion about it, I was like, I'll try to keep it as brief and as the way I think about it. Try to keep it small rather than expanding into craziness, and then we'll all get lost and none of us are helping each other.
I love to go on to the big, and I've wrestled with things like free will a lot and things like that, but actually I come back to the simple truth that God is in control, but what you do matters. And the two don't always they don't always sit easily together, but I do believe that what you do is you make real decisions and they have real consequences, and I also believe that God is ultimately in control. So I hold the two. I was thinking earlier, actually, it's on, in this modern age, we probably can understand it a little bit easier than in the past, maybe, because we've got things like AIs now, and actually, although the programmer sets up the AI, they let the AI learn and do things, and sometimes it explores on its own. If you thought about a creator of the universe, the complexity of their creation is going to be so much greater than any AI that we make. But it has some similarities, and you can understand actually a little bit about that difference between free will, but the programmer is still in control. They can still step in when they want to. but that gives you a little bit of a visual image of how I see it, I suppose.
I think that was a pretty good way to answer that. Like I said, it was a very difficult one. I don't think I understood the message for probably a day and a half. Like not ignoring, but I was like, how in the world do you really answer that? And
Yeah.
in a way, not in a way that is satisfying, but in a way that actually makes sense.
I'm sorry, I waffled on.
No,
But
that's absolutely fine. I already sent my reply as a text message, so don't worry about it.
the other thing I think it's worth saying, and I've probably said it I haven't said it, but it's important, is actually when you're faced with the consequences of actions and the reality, and sometimes we have real disappointment, and it's really hard. It's really easy on as a theoretical discussion, isn't it? But reality is so much harder and so much more painful at times. And
Oh, for sure, because there's always so many consequences to everything you do, and you gotta think it's not even consequences for you; it's other people involved because there's so many decisions. So yeah, like I said, it gets super complicated. It's not just a simple prayer and go.
yeah, life is messy, and I think, and it's okay to go through the whole range of emotions, to be angry, to be sad, to be full of rage at times. That's okay. I think sometimes we find it that it's not okay to be sad, to be angry, but even I think God wants us to be. We need to be real with who we are. Let's not hide away. I'm terrible for burying my emotions and pretending I'm a robot. No, I don't pretend I'm a robot, but I do bury my emotions too much, and I think it's a very, particularly probably a male trait because our society has encouraged it so much.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't think you're alone in that one. Especially nowadays, you get called out for it as well. Well, I suppose you've always been called out, but not you entirely, but like I mean, as a male population, if any time you express any sort of emotion, you look at it as like, oh, you're a weaker male, etc., etc., which is so stupid because we both share emotions, but for whatever reason, we've been said, well, it's just been said, you don't show it, which is dumb, but so where it goes, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I've had a conversation with a few people recently. It's actually, wouldn't it be? It's so unhealthy. It's so unhealthy to.
Did you start crying when you were having this
No, I
conversation?
didn't. I still don't cry really, but it's so unhealthy, isn't it, to bury our emotions and not to talk about things, because so much of actually having real honest conversations with your friends and those close to you is so invaluable. And they always talk about a problem shared is a problem halved, and it's not always true, but it does have some element of truth to it, that when you share things, it's a burden that is taken off of you, and actually your friends and family want to be there for you. And I just think I hope that anyone who's feeling like that just find someone that they can share with. Sorry, that got real deep, but
No, no, but that's an important message, and I think it's one that we don't say often enough. And it seems obvious enough, like, oh, just have that conversation. But like you say, it takes a lot of build up, and like what would be the backlash? It's so much that goes on. So sometimes you think, oh, is it even worth it? Or rather just sit with it, bury it, and then it comes out in some other negative way, which is always quite sad.
It's life, isn't it? Life's messy. But I think if we bear with each other and love one another and share a little bit of understand each other's failings and bear with them, the world would be a lot better place.
This be true.